Hello, Joe. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
Today's guest is Joe Kinstler, and I really wanted to spotlight him today because of the full spectrum of creative skills he possesses. In addition to being a fantastic illustrator, graphic artist, and web designer, Joe also has the knowledge of being a UX and UI designer. This is one of the most sought-after skills that big corporations are looking for today. And before we start, Joe, where can people learn more about you?
Man, that introduction was great. It definitely makes me seem cooler than I probably am. And you've had so many great artists and stuff on the show, so it's an honor to be here and talking about my craft and stuff. For those of you who care, you can check my website out. It's kinstlerdesign.com. That's Kinstler design.com. Or, Instagram, I post pretty regularly at Joey_Kinstler.
Fantastic. And listeners, please connect with Joe, and I appreciate if you hit the subscribe and like button for our show. And Joe, before I get into UI and UX design, could you please tell us how you find your way into a creative career?
Yeah, so I went to college with the intention to become an illustrator, painter. And so for most of my college career, was heavy into the fine arts, but I very quickly realized that you had to work your butt off to be successful in that field. And I really wanted to have be a huge in the creative industry. So I quickly transitioned over to the media arts, and I took a website class and actually started coding. And I just really loved that. The first web page I created was a Rembrandt fan page. And at the time, actually in college, they didn't have any UXUI type. It was just strictly website coding. So I never really thought about it as you're an artist that's creating this site and making the site look pretty. But my first job out of college, actually, they hired me for that. They liked the artistic, creativity infused websites. And so through a whim, I ended up getting a job right out of college focused on UX, UI, making websites and all that stuff. So, and then from there, I jumped from one job to the next and kind of been a couple jobs down the road, been making some websites. And I'm currently work at an advertising agency right now in town called The Digital Ring in Madison, Wisconsin here. And that's pretty much primarily what we do is UX, UI, website creation. So.
Fantastic. Let me ask you this question. One of my goals in creating this podcast is to shed some light on traditional artists that use paintbrush and canvases and show how they're successful, right? They can have a living and they don't have to be, quote, a starving artist.
Right.
Before you got to college, did you have that crossroads where you asked yourself, should I be a fine artist or should I be using more digital platform to express my creativity? Did you have that question? Did you ask yourself that?
Yeah. In high school and stuff, I didn't really take any core art classes really until I got to college. And so that was kind of my first introduction. Up until then, I just been like sketching and illustrating and whatnot in my sketchbook, drawing superheroes and fun stuff like that just for fun. But once I got to college, it was like, I think the gravity and the seriousness of like, okay, I got to make a living out of this. And I think my parents really pushed me and my dad specifically to think about it tangibly, right? Your skill tangibly and to really, how can I make a living out of this? And I think at that time it was, again, like, and it's still growing, the UX UI industry. And there's a real push of late that designers with a art and design focus are coming over to UX UI and creating websites. So I think I saw that and I saw untapped potential in me to explore that and see if I could do it. Yeah, it's been great ever since.
So, like I mentioned, and you just mentioned there in the intro of the show, you happen to have that valuable experience of being a UI UX designer. Big corporations know how important this is to their success of their company. Many of our listeners, me included, may not exactly know what it is since it's like relatively a new term. Can you explain to us more about it?
Yeah, definitely. So it's a common misconception, and really only people that know or understand what UX UI is, it's user experience, user interface. And they're often said in the same, like we're talking about now, UX UI. But the bigger corporations you get, a lot of times there's a rift between those, and it's usually two different people. So the UX part of it, the user experience, is a lot more strategic and strategy thinking, which is very intriguing. It's how is the user interacting with your app? How is the user interacting with your website? Where they're clicking? Should we put a button here or here, and go into the research and analysis of that? But then the UI, and that's kind of the area that I like to play in more is, okay, now that we have the site functioning in a wireframe basis, how can we make it pretty? How can we polish the turd, if you will, take it from wireframe, put colors into it, and make it really pretty so that the user enjoys it, adding little micro interactions, things like that. But the fun thing is as you go to smaller advertising agencies, nonprofits, things like that, that UX UI role becomes one. You're kind of thinking, you're designing and using that research and analysis phase and stuff all in one, because oftentimes, realistically, corporations can't pay for that. Companies can't pay for two people to do one job. So that's definitely been a shift. And I think it's something important that designers need to be aware of, that you need to have that analytical approach to your designs and put reason into why a button is somewhere, or, why a text is so big or so small, or something like that. So.
And I'm going to butcher this, but so the way my brain wraps around it is the word user experience, and not just in what you do, is more and more today thought of, right? Even if you walk into your favorite store, they're thinking through, like, say you're in a grocery aisle, we're going to put the cereal boxes that are really colorful at the eye level because it's going to grab your attention. Or maybe should we put it in a lower level that maybe it should be pointing to the kids that make the decision on cereal? They tend to think of it strategically, the experience itself, right? And so you actually do both, but predominantly the design portion of that. Am I correct?
So currently at the advertising agency that I work at, and with a lot of my freelance clients as well, freelance clients, yeah, I'm doing all of it. I'm coding in the back end, talking through user experience, user interface, everything. But with a typical 9 to 5, yeah, you're going to be primarily playing in the realm of the interface, the design of it. But I think it's worth noting that if you're a young designer and intrigued in this field, you just have to know both of those. That's a huge chunk of the market. If you're lucky, you can grow and become just UI designer. But obviously, having that UX background and thinking about that definitely enhances your interface design skills, just making you think about it. And even knowing how to code and design around code, so that when it gets passed off to the developers and stuff, you can talk their language and make that process seamless as well. So,
and I have noticed this when you're looking at jobs out there, boy, if you have UI UX, I mean, they're snatching you up as soon as possible. They're paying top dollar, especially if you have experience in this. It's so sought after. The UX portion of it, the user experience, that portion of it is just a approach, a strategy, right? That's the part where you don't have to be literally a designer using the tools, but you're just thinking to the experience. Am I right there?
Yeah, you're 100% right. And if you go to more traditional colleges that have that, or design colleges that have a user experience focus, like, I mean, boy, it's going to be harder to find a job, but you're even more sought after because you had that UX experience. What a typical UX designer does, and this is more traditional, but you're in sticky notes phase for quite a while, and you're using paper and pen and just drawing out almost wireframes and talking about like the user journey and playing more in that research and analysis phase with content and stuff like that, copywriters and whatnot. But then the line is drawn between the UX and UI. Then you work closely with the copywriters, but then you also work very closely with the UI designer. But yeah, you don't have to be a designer at the true sense of the word to be a user experience designer, if that makes sense. But obviously, a UI designer is heavy into the design field. And actually, a lot of UI designers don't even use Illustrator, Photoshop. We primarily use Adobe XD, InVision, Figma. There's multiple programs out there that from low to high fidelities. But obviously, having that design focused mindset, and then it's essential, obviously, just like any creative job, to have experience in the Creative Cloud and whatnot. But yeah.
Now, I think that most people can wrap their brains around why they want to go into traditional art or even graphic design. But can you tell us what the best part of being a UI UX designer is, at least for you?
Yeah, what a great question. I think what drew it to me initially was just, at its core, UI is just and even UX is solving the user's problem or fulfilling a task and carrying a user through that journey. And so I think, and it's something that a lot of brands don't do great. a lot of companies, a lot of websites. So if you look at a website that's not designed and developed through UXUI and stuff and has that thought process, and then you look at a site that does, I think the difference is pretty great. And having an impact on that user and those brands that put value into that is so great, and it's infectious to impact a user and how they look at your website and stuff. Yeah, that's an issue what drew me towards it, and I think that's still what makes it a passion of mine, is that solving a problem through the user's eyes.
And so this is just my opinion. Joe, I'd love for your feedback. Why I think people get paid top dollar for this. So in most corporations, just say a small, mid-sized company, if you went backwards 15, 20 years ago, it was a luxury to have a design team, right? That means that you don't have to go to an ad agency or a design firm. You had somebody in-house doing your designs. And now when you're talking about UI and UX design, most companies would be happy to have a creative team. But now this is something that is even a bigger need for big corporations. Like a small company doesn't have the budget to have a specialist that just thinks about their user experience and user interface design. So they wouldn't have a UX UI designer. But if you're a big corporation, you name the Fortune 500 companies, I promise you they're all thinking in this level. They're all hiring UI UX designers. And that's why they're also paying well, is because it's meant for, at this point, for the big companies to use. But in another 15 years, 10 years, 5 years, I don't know, it'll be more of a staple, I think, position in a company, right? Now, every company has a graphic designer. It's like really rare that even a small company, a mid-sized company, doesn't have a graphic designer on staff. But let's transition. Looking at your portfolio, Joe, you have so much different skills. And I know you also love to do freelance work. And for a lot of small businesses, they don't go to big agencies because, frankly, they just can't afford them. It's too expensive to pay for complete branding, website brochures. But I was looking at your website. You are a one-stop shop. I mean, other than photography, which I did not see as your skill set, you do everything else. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience working as a freelancer for your personal clients?
Yeah. And thanks. Yeah, that's a huge compliment. I think it's a weird realm because I haven't really had the luxury. I'm a fairly young designer still, so I haven't had the luxury to kind of niche down. And that was kind of obviously they push that. Any podcast you listen to, any YouTube channel, any college you go to, your professors, everyone's just telling you, find a niche. You're going to succeed so much. And man, I like exploring. I like creating cool shit people will love. I've had success with that. So that's kind of why painting, illustration, I don't do photography, but website design, all that. It's fun to play around and see where creative expertise can go. But yeah, freelance has been fun. It's been interesting, especially with the past year and the craziness of the gig economy and whatnot. It's been busy still, surprisingly. It's picking back up even more so now, but it's definitely taken a shift. My 9 to 5, like when at 5 o'clock hits, like I open my laptop and get working on my freelance work. So it definitely takes some grit and some patience. And I'm still learning. I'm still learning as I go and finding these little like tips and tricks and whatnot to the industry. But yeah, it's been fun.
What in particular are your favorite projects when you do a freelance job? Is it corporate branding where you're coming up with their complete integrated look from their logo to their brochures, to their websites? Do you like just doing illustrations? What type of projects, when it's in front of you, that you actually particularly get excited about?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think of recently, I think the things that get me excited past couple of years have really been large format vehicle wrap design. I had a short stint at a print shop here in Madison that kind of introduced me to it. And I've kind of gotten the bug ever since and been doing that for freelancing, doing that, finding clients, trailer wrap design, truck wrap design, pretty much any large format banners, things like that. But probably that gets me most excited. A lot of the corporate brand identity logo design is that I do in my 9 to 5, and I really love that and kind of get to flex my muscles there. But so then I like to kind of pivot and shift and do something in the afternoon and nights and weekends and stuff. And a lot of that too fulfills. I do some medical illustrations as well. It was kind of like a fun gig that I got right out of college and haven't stopped doing since, doing cover and textbook illustrations for a medical company. But other than that, yeah, logo branding, it's all fun. And having the variety, I think, is the most fun.
I'm looking at your Madison Auto Recycling, where they've wrapped this this truck.
Yeah.
Great work. Was this done in Illustrator?
Yeah, it was actually done in Photoshop. And that was when I was working at the print shop in Madison here. I was one of the only designers there. It was a smaller print shop, and we would print it and have installers wrap it on the vehicle. It was all done in Photoshop. You just take sizings basically of the vehicle and kind of design it. And designing in 3D space is just a whole other beast in and of itself. But I knew that I had a passion for design. And so going into vehicle wrap design, like I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know how to design in space and how your graphics warp around hubs and hoods and things like that. So, but now coming out of that with, pocket full of experience, it's been great. And it's always fun to see your designs in Photoshop and sometimes Illustrator and whatnot come to life from screen, plastered onto cars, buses and trucks and stuff. So
for people who are not designers, and when they ask like someone like myself, what's one of the coolest parts of being a designer? And there's a lot of different answers, but one of them in particular is when you see your work come to life, especially not necessarily, it looks cool in a brochure and a flyer or even a poster. But when you start talking about like environmental design or a vehicle wrap, when it's in this large of a scale and it's pulling up in front of you to go see it at the first time, it's mind boggling because you do remember building it out from scratch. And now here it is in front of you. How did you feel when this thing was presented to you, this truck?
It was all smiles. In that project in particular, and the projects that came after that were pretty well received from clients. And a lot of times too and that's why I think I love doing it, is that in and of itself, creating well-designed vehicle wraps that are traveling down the interstate and whatnot is really an untapped market, I think, right now. And that's why I love playing in that realm. It is client comes to you and they have this idea or whatnot, and they bring you this like junky ass car and they tell you to like get cool. Here's your brand. It's got kind of like they'll give you a PNG logo and not really even an SVG or Illustrator file logo and stuff. And they maybe have like a half-ass brand, but that's the exciting part, is watching their brand come to life and seeing their reaction. And you almost see this like rejuvenated, life for their brand, and they get excited about their brand again, and you get excited about their brand, and bringing new life to that. And the company that comes to you is always exciting.
If I ask you, what has been your most memorable project you've done in your career? Is there anything that comes into mind?
Man, that's a tough question.
That only means that you've had a bunch that you're having trouble nailing that down.
I think it's such an interesting question because the most current project is the coolest, is the one I'm most excited about. But then it's like, all right, like how can I do this better? And after you look at it, you're like, damn, that's not really, I could do better and stuff, and improve in this way or that. But I think like the most rewarding, only because it was probably the most challenging, would be the Punisher wrap that I did while at Madison Graphics in Sun Prairie here. But that was challenging because...
Is that on your website? I'm sorry, not to cut you off because I want to see that.
It's on my Behance, yeah. And I think it's on the website. But yeah, that was most exciting because that vehicle had so many curves, so many little grooves, insets. It was it's a tractor trailer, big. It pulls big weights and for competitions and whatnot. But that was an interesting one because we wanted to almost bring this vehicle to life through design and make it seem like these flames were really coming out of the truck and being powered. These flames were powering the truck and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of like motion and physics that go into the design of that wrap. So a lot of different panels, and I think that in particular had probably about 15 to 20 Photoshop files, if you can believe it. Wow. Different print files that we had to kind of piece together. And being the sole designer in that project was very rewarding to, work through the kinks and figure it out as we went. So yeah, that was probably the most rewarding. I don't know about my whole career, but yeah, there's for everything, like my favorite logo that I've done, favorite website, like because I'm doing so much, it's fun to have different favorite projects, I guess, if you will.
Joe, we're near the end here, so let me ask you some more probably personal questions so the audience get to know you better. You haven't been out as a professional a lot of years, but when you were in college and before you started your career, but now you're in it now, has it been everything you thought it would be, and has anything surprised you about it?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. Yeah, I think there's been a lot of surprising things, and I think there's been a lot of shift. And but that's the beauty of the industry is you have to have thick skin, you have to be adaptable. I got laid off at a job here, right? My first job in Madison. First job out of college was in lacrosse, and I moved down to Madison, got laid off, and that was a huge buzzkill. And you can believe it was on Halloween. Luckily, I didn't wear a costume. But yeah, and so to pivot and really like reevaluate what I wanted to design and be a part of the community down here in Madison, and really finding my home. And so I kind of bounce around jobs, and I think realistically what young designers have to realize is you're in college and you're a UXUI designer, you want to be a painter, illustrator, whatnot. Like you have big dreams, you have big thoughts, and you're like, I want to be Saul Bass creating logo designs and all that stuff. And the thing is and the thing that it took me a while is to find the equilibrium between what your client wants and how you're going to push the envelope and how you're going to be creative within that creative brief, if you will. A lot of clients, the day-to-day clients, they don't want that type of design. They can't understand that type of in-depth web design. If you put out a pretty website or something like that, if it doesn't function for them and if it doesn't drive their ROI for their business and stuff, it's not hitting the mark for them. So I think having that mental shift was something that took me a while to understand. And I'm still understanding and learning how to better please the clients and hit the mark every time. So, but yeah, believe it or not, even if for the people that seem like they've made it, like they're still learning. Everyone in the industry is still learning. And that's kind of the fun part about all of it.
What do you want to accomplish in the future that you haven't accomplished yet?
Oh, man, another great question. I think that's a hard question to answer. I think as long as I'm creating cool stuff and making clients happy and bringing life to new brands and whatnot, I'm happy and content. I think continuing to push the industry forward and any design that I can is always rewarding. And if I'm doing that for the next 10, 15 years, whatever, I'm a happy guy. I think inevitably being a full freelancer is the goal. There's a lot of designers out there that have taken that leap. There's a lot of great designers that I follow that have taken that leap and succeeded. I'm obviously still ready to take that leap and waiting for the right time. But I think that, becoming a full-time freelancer is the goal within the next near future, if you will.
One of the reasons why I wanted to have a conversation with you as well is young designers, right? Sometimes they'll ask me for my perspective. I'm a 20-year designer.
Sure.
And sometimes I don't want to act as if like I'm disconnected because I really do remember when I was still in their shoes. But you still are relatively new in your career. You're doing a lot of cool things. Could you tell a young designer, maybe in college, on some advice on when he or she gets out, how to make it out there, how to get a job? What things did you have to adapt to be successful?
Oh, yeah. I think, I was just listening to a podcast the other day, and the one guy said something like, you're always most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were. And that kind of resonated with me, that the idea that everyone is an expert in something. And I think if you're willing to learn and if you're willing to open your eyes, you can seek that and learn and grow from that. And it's interesting because the young designers coming out now are even different than when I was in college because of social media and the ability to get your art seen by thousands plus. But it's interesting. Everyone's got their own path, I think, is the biggest thing. And, don't be afraid not to niche down. Don't be afraid. Don't bottleneck yourself into just doing logos or something like that. Not discrediting the people that have really succeeded from doing that. I think there's a lot of people that I follow that I'm secretly jealous of, that they've succeeded in, doing just logos or something like that. But don't be afraid to kind of play around and might stumble upon something like vehicle wrap design that you really love, that if you would have turned that away, you wouldn't have found that passion. So.
Fantastic, Joe. Thank you for sharing your creative journey with us. I love hearing the perspective of a young designer who's out there doing fantastic work. And lastly, where can people connect with you or even look at your work again?
Kinstlerdesign.com. Otherwise, always follow Instagram, Joey_Kinstler. It's been, like I said, it's a great honor to to be with these artists. And I think you're doing something great here with shedding light on some of these designers and artists out there that are pushing it through the day to day and creating some cool stuff. So.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. Until next time, everybody, take care and bye.